meditations this morning on Psalm 17, and then we'll move into prayer. And so encouraged by everybody's sharing and words this morning. I'm just feeling pumped. I'm feeling energized for Monday, ready to pray. But yeah, I think the themes I'm hearing come up from everybody right now are just the theme of Sam brought up spiritual warfare. You guys were sharing just how honest David is in his prayers to God and his confidence in God. And yeah, those are kind of things I saw this morning as well. And so I think God's just confirming the direction for our prayer time. And Psalm 17, it's a psalm. It seems like he's got some enemies that are making accusations against him and unjust accusations, and he's pleading with God to defend him. And, you know, they're his enemies, like Sam mentioned, real enemies. And just as I've been paying attention a little bit to the news, and I think right now is a season where, you know, by God's grace, we have God on our side and we're seeking God, but a lot of people don't. And so there's a lot of spiritual oppression going on right now. I just even read how much alcohol sales have increased in the United States. And so, I mean, maybe in moderation, that's fine. But I imagine there's a lot of people that are abusing alcohol, trying to deal with their stress, deal with what's going on. And we've already talked about the increase in domestic violence and abuse and that's happening. And so I think the enemy is trying to oppress people using this situation, you know, for his ends. But God is our God. And I love how in verse 7, he talks about, wondrously show your steadfast love, O Savior of those who seek refuge from their adversaries at your right hand. And in the Psalms, when David calls upon God's right hand, it's like a military term. It's asking God to arise like a military warrior, like a warrior on his behalf to fight for him. And so he's asking God to fight on his behalf. And then in verse 8, he says, keep me as the apple of your eye. And you know, I wasn't quite sure what that meant. I mean, we've heard it before, so I kind of was looking it up to make sure I understood that. And it's pretty fascinating. It actually means, it's a Hebrew expression that literally means the little man of the eye. And so it refers to the tiny reflection of yourself that you can see in other people's pupils. So when you're looking at somebody's pupil and you see your little reflection, that's what it refers to be the apple of someone's eye. So it means to be the apple of someone's eye means clearly that you're being gazed upon and watched closely by that person. So it's like your very image is in the eyes of that person. And so it just gives us a sense of just that sense of how God gazes upon David or gazes upon us, that we're literally in the center of his eye, that he's watching us so intimately, so carefully. And so that's a beautiful picture. And even in Deuteronomy 32:10, God uses that language where it speaks of Israel, that he found him in a desert land and in the howling waste of the wilderness. He encircled him, he cared for him, he kept him as the apple of his eye. And so it's that sense of even in the wilderness, God was protecting Israel as the apple of his eye. And David says, hide me in the shadow of your wings. You know, that sense of being covered by God, being protected by God. Just so comforting to know that we're the apple of his eye and that he covers us and watches over us and protects us. And again, in verse 13, he says, arise, O Lord, confront him, subdue him. Again, just calling upon God to be the warrior, to intervene on his behalf. And, you know, he talks about these men whose portion is in this life. And I was just thankful this morning that our portion is not in this life alone, but that our portion is with God in heaven. And so regardless of what's happening around us, yeah, things are crazy, but there's so much more to us than what's in this life. We have this eternal inheritance in Jesus, and just thankful for that. And then in verse 15, he says, I shall behold your face in righteousness. When I awake, I will be satisfied with your likeness. And so, again, just we have the satisfaction that comes from God alone, and his likeness that's being formed in us, as we saw yesterday in the message, that God's refining his likeness in us through this season. And he's our warrior. He's fighting our battles for us. And yeah, we have a victory in him. And so I want to encourage us this morning with that sense of in the spiritual battle, we have this warrior God that's on our side. And so we can pray these bold prayers, these confident prayers like David did, and come to him in confidence. And so I just want to encourage us as we go into our prayer times. So thanks, guys, for your encouragements as well.